Hey everybody, it's Stefan again for atuts.com, and in today's tutorial we are gonna be creating interesting logo review project. So let's take a look at the preview. Okay, let's create a new composition with 150 size and call it custom particle. That's the composition where basically we are going to type all the letters from A to Z with capital letters and size of 130. Let's center the letter here, make it also bold, and each letter will be 1 frame long. So let's trim this layer to be only 1 frame long, and basically just duplicate this layer, drag it over and change it to B, and repeat this action until you get all the letters in the alphabet. I'm going to pause the video to do this for you, and then I'll come back. Okay, I'm ready, and now trim this comp to be long only 26 frames. So let's hit N on the keyboard to set the end of the work area, and right click and trim comp to work area. And you can see, let's create a preview, the letters. Okay, so now let's change a bit these letters. Create a new adjustment layer on top of the all layers and apply a ramp effect. Generate ramp and set the top point just on the top of the letter, and the bottom point just to the bottom part of the A, and change this color to bright grayish color or something like that. And now let's add another effect. Come to effect, color correction, and choose colorama. Basically we are going to make all the letters look like they are made from metal or something like that. So hit on the modify and uncheck the modify alpha checkbox, and you can see when we add a colorama how we get this sharp edge on the letter. So unchecking modify alpha solves this problem, and come to output cycle and use the golden 1 preset. And after that we are going to add another effect. Come to perspective and use bevel alpha, and this effect makes the letters look more like 3D letters, and just increase the edge thickness a bit, and I'll leave it like that. Now add another effect. Come to effect, color correction, tint to make it black and white. Close this down and come to effect, color correction again, and choose curves. Now we are going to use a very interesting technique to make this look really shiny 3D metal monochrome looking letters. So drag this point up here, create a point right here and drag it down like so, and click here to create another point and drag it up like so, and again create another point, drag it down maybe here, and again create another point here and drag this point to the bottom. And you can see how easily we get these nice metal shiny looking letters. So close this down. You can colorize the letters if you want by adding a colorizing filter, but in this case I'll leave it just like that. And it's time to create our main composition. So come to composition, new composition, and choose the HDTV preset right here at the bottom and make it 20 seconds long, and let's name it characters animation and hit OK. Come to the project panel and drag our custom particle composition here and turn it off. Now create new solid layer, black, and call it Fractal Noise and hit OK, and come to Effect, Noise and Grain, Fractal Noise. Let's change some of the parameters here. Fractal noise type, we're going to change the noise type from soft linear to spline and increase the contrast and decrease the brightness maybe, or more, 26, 5, OK. Let's drop the resolution down to half to work faster, and increase the complexity of the noise to the maximum, which is 20, and come to transform, uncheck the checkbox for uniform scaling and scale it like so. Yeah, I think this looks good, and the only thing we are going to do for the fractal noise is to make it evolves. So hold down Alt and click to evolution stopwatch and type a very simple expression. I think that everybody know this expression, so let's type it just real quick. Time multiplied by 150 and click away, and this makes our fractal noise evolving like so. And the only thing we're going to do for the fractal noise layer is to animate its opacity. So come to the 2 seconds mark right here, hit T to review the opacity property, click the stopwatch and set the opacity to 0, and come to the 4 second mark and make the opacity 100%, and that's it. We are ready with our fractal noise layer. Now let's collapse this and create another solid layer, new solid, and call it lens flare. Now let's add the lens flare effect. Come to effect, generate lens flare. You can use the no white factory lens flares, but for this tutorial I'm going to use the built-in lens flares in After Effects, and change the flare brightness just a bit like so, and tint the lens flare. Come to effect, color correction, tint, and add another adjustment. Come to effect, color correction, curves, just to increase the contrast of this lens flare, like so. Crush the white areas, and finally add the effect, blur and sharpen, fast blur, and set the blurriness to 100. Click the repeat edge pixels checkbox and collapse all these parameters, and set the lens flare just a bit below the center of the composition. Like so. And close this. And use this layer with the lens flare as a Luma matte for the Fractal Noise layer. So basically, where you see the lens flare, it reveals the fractal noise. And we do this just to make the white in the beginning more random. So again, create a new solid, black color, and call it lens flare 1, and hit OK. And at our effect, come to effect, generate lens flare. But before we continue with this layer here, come back to the previous lens flare layer, hit T to review the opacity, and come to the 4 seconds mark, set a keyframe for opacity, come to 6 seconds mark, and set another keyframe for opacity, this time at 45%, and come to the 8-second mark and set another keyframe for 45% opacity, and then come to 10-second mark, set the opacity to 65%, and then come to 11 seconds mark and set the opacity to 0. Basically, this will make the fractal noise layer more visible at the beginning, where we have this strong white here, and later it will fade out very smoothly. And again, we want the fractal noise to be more visible at this point, at the 10-second mark. So let's back to our character's animation composition. Turn on the lens flare 1 layer, and let's start make some changes here. First of all, let's place it right below the center of the comp, which is right here, and then add a tint effect to make it black and white, and then add another adjustment, a curves adjustment, and increase the contrast just a bit, and we are going to colorize this lens flare in a blue color, like so. Okay, and finally add a fast blur effect and set the blur to 200. That looks okay. And now let's change the blend mode to add and collapse this part with the blending modes, and hit F4 to toggle between switches and modes. So set the lens flare 1 layer to add, and let's animate the flare brightness and flare opacity. So come to the 1 second mark. I'll just zoom the timeline. Come to the 1 second mark and set a keyframe for flare brightness and set the flare brightness to 0. Now come to 1 second and 7 frames and set the flare brightness to 90, and then come to 1 second and 17 frames, 10 frames forward, and set the flare brightness to 0 again, and then come to 2 seconds and 10 frames and set the flare brightness to 100. And basically we want a strong white at the beginning, like a blinking white, and then it disappears for a second, and again you can see the white from the center. So leave the flare brightness like so, and let's animate the opacity of the layer. Come to the 8 second mark, hit T to review the opacity of the lens flare, set a keyframe and set it to 30%, and come to the 10 second mark and set the opacity to 55%, and come to the 11 second mark, set it to 0. So basically that's the basic animation of the lens flare. And now let's create another layer with a lens flare. Just duplicate this layer, come to edit, duplicate, and put it below our lens flare no layer, call it lens flare 2, set the transfer mode to screen. Let's animate some of the parameters here. Just leave the flare brightness animation like so, but increase the flare brightness at the 2 second and 10 frames mark to 125, and animate the fastbower effect. Set a keyframe for the fastbower at the 1 second and 7 frames mark. Set a keyframe, set it to 100, and come to 2 seconds and 10 frames mark and set the fastbower to something like so. Come to the 4 seconds mark and set a keyframe for opacity. So click on the stopwatch to delete all the keyframes, set a keyframe for opacity and set it to 50%. Come to the 6 seconds mark, set the opacity to 45%, and come to the 8 second mark and just set a keyframe again for 45% opacity, and come to the 10 second mark, set the opacity to 70%, come to the 11 second mark and set the opacity to 0. So that was a bit tedious about creating all these lens flares and fractal noise and custom particles, etc. But we are done with this animation, so we can now start with the fun part of the tutorial, making some particles flying around. Let's create another solid and call it big particles and hit OK. Let's add effect trap code particular and show this layer, and you can see just the basic sphere particles emitting from the center. And open the emitter section and let's change some values here. First of all, change the direction from uniform to directional and change the Y rotation to 180 degrees. So the particles come towards the camera. Then change the Z position to 5000 to make the particles really far away from the camera. And let's animate some of the parameters here. Let's come to the 3-second mark and set a keyframe about the velocity of the particles, and set the velocity to 3500, which is a very strong velocity, as you can see. Hit U to review the keyframes and come to the 4-second mark and change the velocity to 0, and come to the 6 seconds mark, set a keyframe about particles per second, and 10 frames forward set the particles to 0, so we stop emitting particles at the 6 seconds. Let's change the other parameters, like come to particle part, and here we will change the particle type from sphere to textured polygon. And we use textured polygon because if we use a sprite particle and choose the texture for the sprite particle and pick a random still frame and increase the size of the particles, you can see the particles, how they look and behave. And when we change this to textured polygon, and we can adjust the rotation of the particles so they look different, as you can see here, and that's what we going for. So let's reset all the settings here. Set the life of the particles to 15 seconds and time sampling random still frame, that basically picks a random still frame from the decomposition, and that makes all the particles to be different. Now let's change some of the rotation values here. Rotation X, set it to 30 maybe. Rotation Y, set it to 60, and rotation Z, set it to 25 maybe, and random rotation 100. I think this looks fine. And just random speed, set it to 0.5 just to give it a little bit of random speed. Size, set the size to 100 to see the letters a bit better. Size random 20, and size overdrive, we are going to use this preset here and just drag like so. And opacity overdrive, again the same, just copy this and paste it. I think that's it for the particles section. Now let's come to the physics. Set the air resistance to 1 and check the air resistance rotation checkbox, so air resistance affects the rotation of the letters. Let's change the spin frequency to 0 and fade in spin 0, and increase the wind Z to minus 3500, so it pushes the particles from the center towards the camera. Come to the 4-second mark and set a keyframe about wind Z, and come to the 6 seconds mark and set a keyframe for wind Z to 0, so it stops pushing the letters. Hit U to review all the keyframes and make the second keyframe of the wind easy ease. Right click, keyframe assistant easy ease, or hit F9, and basically that will do the trick, because all the velocity and wind Z stop at the 6 seconds point, and the particles are just flowing and smoothly stopping and freezing in the air. And then we come to the 7 seconds and 10 frames and set a keyframe for wind Z and set it to 0, and come to the 8 seconds and 10 frames and send the wind Z to 10,000. So basically that will push the particles back and they will collapse into the light and form the logo. So basically that's the key to get this animation done. Another thing we are going to change here is the turbulence field. So come to turbulence field, set a keyframe at 6 seconds for the turbulence field effect position, and come to the 8 seconds mark and set the effect position to 800, so we get a little bit of random movement when the particles start to collapse. Just change a few of the settings here, scale to 0.5 to get a very subtle and smooth movement of the letters. Change the complexity to 1 and increase the octave multiplier to 10. Set the octave scale to 0 and evolution speed say to 0.1, because we are going for a very slow and smooth movement of the letters. I think that's it for the turbulence field tab. So let's close the physics tab and let's animate the opacity of this layer. Come to 1 second and 14 frames exactly and swipe the layer so the particle starts to emit at this point, and set a keyframe for opacity. Hold down shift and hit T to review the opacity property. Set it to 0. Come to 1 second and 24 frames, 10 frames forward, and set the opacity to 100%. And then come to 9 seconds and 20 frames, set a keyframe for opacity, and come to 10 seconds and 10 frames and set the opacity to 0. I think just I messed up the opacity here. Just make it to the 11 second they disappear. Like so. Yeah, I think that they should disappear when they almost collapse. And you can't see the fade because we have a very strong white here at the end, as you can see. And let's get back to our character's animation composition, and collapse this layer, and we are going to duplicate it to create the another particles. But before we do that, let's create a new white. Come to layer, new white, and hit OK. We created this white because we are going to use the shading options of the particular version 2. So select the white, hit AA, hold down shift and hit P to review the position and white options, and shadow diffusion 25 pixels is OK. Cast shadows on, intensity 100, maybe just brighten up the color a tiny bit, and white options point white is OK, and change the position of this white to 1500 and 500 and negative 500 to push it back, and just duplicate this white, hit P to review the position and move it over at this side, and maybe like so, and leave that at 500 and this at negative 500, and duplicate this white, hit P to review the position and set this to be at the center of the comp like so, and move it to the bottom part of the composition and leave it like so, and duplicate it again, hit P to review the position, and this time move it up like so, and duplicate it again for the last time and hit P to review the position. Just make it right in the center of the composition and far away from us. So basically we have one white. Let's come to the custom view. We have one white here, which is in front the particles, not behind them and far away from the camera, and four whites which surround all the particles and white up them. So let's collapse all the whites, come to the particles layer, and for this white just hit T to review the intensity and increase it just a bit, and come to this particle layer, come to shading and turn it on, and change the white fall off from natural lux to AE whites. Set the ambient white to 100, set the diffuse to 50, specular amount to 25 maybe, and specular sharpness to 50, and I think that's what we are going for. As you can see, some of the letters are white up more, some of them are fade in the dark. So basically that's the effect we are going for. Let's make this white shy and hide them, and select this layer and come to edit duplicate to duplicate it and rename it medium particles, and we are going to change some of the settings here. So the first thing we are going to change is the number of particles. Hit U to review the keyframes and increase the number of particles from 100 to 300. Direction spread set it to 25, and leave the rest like it is, and come to the particle section. Change the rotation of the particles to make them look different and random. Rotate X 50, rotate Y 20, and rotate Z, let's say 80. Random rotation 100, and let's change the size of the particles. Let's make it 35, and size random make it 40, and come down to the bottom world transform and rotate the Z rotation to negative 45 degrees. So basically this rotates the whole world of particular, and we rotate the particles so they look at different position, not in the same position as the main particles, as you can see here. So make it negative 45, and that's it for this layer. Just come to 1 second and 7 frames and shift this layer here, so the small particles, they come first, just 7 frames early, and then we have the big particles. So turn off this layer and duplicate the medium particles layer. Come to edit, duplicate, turn off this layer and rename these small particles. And what we are going to change here is again the number of particles. Hit U to review all the keyframes, and increase the number of particles to 1500, which is a lot of particles. And come to particle and again change the rotation of the particles. Rotate X, let's say 120, rotate Y, let's say 45, and rotate Z 15. And come to the size and set the size of the particles to 10 and size random to 20. And let's see, come to the transform world and Z rotation, change it to 90 degrees. So we have a different position for each of the particle layers. As you can see, it takes a bit to render because we have a lot of particles in this composition. And change the transfer mode of the 3 layers for the particles to add. Turn on the motion blur for the composition and turn on the motion blur for the particles. I'm going to pre-render these particles because it will take forever to render all these particles with motion blur. So I'm going to pre-render the particles and hopefully see you in the next part, the second part of this tutorial, because this part came out longer than I expected. So see you in part 2.